I'm Lorelei Mitchell, 32, and 3 years ago at our annual Thanksgiving dinner, my parents publicly humiliated me by announcing that no one in our family actually liked me. Today, as I watch them frantically calling my siblings for financial help after losing everything in their investment scheme, I remember their exact words. I smile knowing they have no idea that I orchestrated their downfall, or that I now control the family fortune they never thought I deserved. Hey everyone! Before I dive deeper into how I went from family scapegoat to the architect of the sweetest family vengeance you've ever heard, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. If you enjoy family drama with a satisfying revenge twist, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories where karma comes full circle. Now let's get into how a simple family dinner changed everything. Growing up in the Mitchell family meant understanding your place in the hierarchy, and mine was firmly at the bottom. My parents, Richard and Diana Mitchell, were pillars of our community in suburban Boston. He was a prominent investment banker, and she was the perfect social hostess who sat on every charity board that mattered. My older brother Jason followed in our father's footsteps, already making partner at his law firm by 30. My younger sister Olivia was the golden child, beautiful, charming, and recently engaged to the son of our father's business partner. Then there was me, Lorelei, the middle child who never quite fit the Mitchell mold. I didn't have Jason's ruthless ambition or Olivia's effortless social grace. Instead, I built a modest career as a forensic accountant, a profession my parents dismissed as playing with spreadsheets. What they never understood was that my analytical mind caught details others missed, and my quiet persistence meant I never gave up once I started investigating something. Our family gatherings were performances of perfection, carefully orchestrated by my mother to maintain the Mitchell family image. The conversations followed predictable patterns. My father's business successes, Jason's latest courtroom victory, and Olivia's social achievements. When it came to my turn to share, my mother would invariably cut me short or redirect the conversation. "That's nice, dear, but did you hear about Olivia's charity gala? It raised over $200,000. The subtle undermining had been happening for so long that I'd almost grown numb to it. Almost. Because beneath my quiet exterior, I was keeping score of every dismissive comment, every interrupted story, every birthday forgotten, while my siblings received lavish celebrations. I maintained a mental ledger of all the ways they had made me feel invisible in my own family. My parents had a particular talent for making hurtful comments sound like concerned advice. "Lorelei, have you thought about doing something with your hair? First impressions matter in finding a husband. Or don't you think it's time you looked for a more prestigious position? The Mitchell name should open doors for you." Each comment reinforced the message I wasn't meeting their standards. What they didn't know was that I had built a life I was proud of, just one they couldn't understand. My small circle of loyal friends valued my reliability and insight. My colleagues respected my meticulous work ethic and ability to uncover financial discrepancies that others missed. I had even been quietly dating Marcus, a kind-hearted history professor who appreciated my analytical mind and dry humor, but I never brought Marcus to family events. Something inside me knew that exposing someone I cared about to the Mitchell family dynamic would either result in him being charmed by my family while seeing me through their dismissive lens, or worse, watching him become a target of their subtle cruelty by association. The week before that fateful Thanksgiving dinner, I had discovered something concerning while helping my elderly neighbor with her finances. She had invested a significant portion of her retirement savings in Mitchell Financial Partners, my father's investment firm. While reviewing her statements, I noticed discrepancies that raised red flags, returns that seemed too consistent, paperwork that was unnecessarily complex, and fine print that even I, a financial professional, had to read multiple times to understand. I spent nights researching similar investment patterns, comparing them to my father's firm's marketing materials. Each discovery made my stomach knot tighter. The inconsistencies weren't just administrative errors, they pointed to a potentially massive financial scheme. I found myself in an impossible position investigating my own father's business practices while preparing to face my entire family for our annual Thanksgiving gathering. The night before Thanksgiving, I called Marcus and canceled our weekend plans. Family stuff, I explained vaguely, not wanting to burden him with my suspicions about my father. Marcus, ever understanding, didn't press for details. "Just remember what we talked about," he said gently. "You're allowed to set boundaries, Lorelai. Even with family. Boundaries." The concept seemed foreign when it came to the Mitchells. In our family, individual needs were always subordinate to the family image. Privacy was a currency I'd never been allowed to possess. But as I packed my overnight bag for the drive to my parents' expansive colonial home in Wellesley, I made a silent promise to myself this Thanksgiving I would speak up if they crossed the line. I had no way of knowing that this Thanksgiving wouldn't just cross a line. It would obliterate every boundary I had ever tried to establish and fundamentally alter the course of all our lives. As I pulled into the circular driveway of my parents' home, I noticed Jason's Mercedes and Olivia's Range Rover already parked. Of course they had arrived early, probably enjoying pre-dinner drinks and conversation while strengthening their alliance within the family structure. Taking a deep breath, I checked my appearance in the rearview mirror. My chestnut hair was neatly styled, my minimal makeup carefully applied. The emerald green dress I wore was new, an investment piece I had purchased specifically for this dinner, hoping that looking the part might somehow make the evening more bearable. The front door opened before I could ring the bell. My mother stood there, martini in hand, her critical gaze sweeping over me. "Lorelai, you're nearly late. Everyone's already here." She air-kissed my cheek, careful not to smudge her perfect makeup. "That color doesn't quite work with your complexion, but it's fine for today." And so it began, the subtle undermining, the casual cruelty disguised as observation. I forced a smile and stepped into the house that had never felt like home, unaware that in less than 24 hours I would be sitting in my car sobbing in a grocery store parking lot, making a decision that would change everything. The Mitchell family Thanksgiving dinner was always a production worthy of a lifestyle magazine spread. My mother's dining room gleamed with inherited silver and crystal, the table adorned with an elaborate centerpiece of seasonal flowers and gourds. The air was perfumed with roasting turkey and my mother's signature sage stuffing, a recipe she guarded jealously and had pointedly never shared with me, though Olivia had been granted the family culinary secrets years ago. As expected, cocktail hour was well underway when I arrived. Jason stood by the fireplace regaling my father with details of a recent legal victory. His wife Vanessa, a former beauty queen with shrewd social instincts, nodded at appropriate intervals while maintaining her perfect posture. Olivia and her fiancé Carter sat on the Italian leather sofa, her diamond engagement ring catching the light with every animated gesture. My brother-in-law-to-be was from the right kind of family, old money, proper connections, and the executive position at his father's company that had been waiting for him since birth. "Finally decided to join us," Jason called out, raising his whiskey in mock salute. "We were taking bets on whether you'd show up in one of your accountant suits." I forced a laugh, accepting the too sweet white wine my mother pressed into my hand. "I do own other clothes contrary to popular belief. And she cleans up almost nicely," my father added with a chuckle that others might mistake for affectionate teasing. I knew better. Richard Mitchell never said anything without calculation, and his compliments always contained a barb. Dinner proceeded with its familiar rhythm. My father carved the turkey with theatrical flourish. My mother directed the passing of dishes, and conversation flowed around family-approved topics: business successes, social engagements, and carefully curated anecdotes that reinforced the Mitchell family narrative of success and superiority. Lorelai, my mother said suddenly during a lull in conversation, did you ever follow up with Caroline Winthrop's son? I mentioned you to her at the club and she thought you two might hit it off. I set down my fork, feeling the familiar tension creeping up my spine. Mom, I've told you I'm seeing someone. That professor, she waved dismissively. Darling, you can't be serious about him. Academics barely make enough to live on, and you know how important financial compatibility is in a relationship. Before I could respond, Jason jumped in. Plus, don't you want kids someday, Lore? You're not getting any younger, and those university types are always so wrapped up in their research. Marcus is kind and intelligent, and we enjoy each other's company, I said evenly, trying to keep the defensiveness from my voice. Not everyone measures relationship success by income potential, my father snorted. That's the kind of naive thinking that keeps you stuck in that little cubicle job. No ambition, no strategic thinking. Actually, Dad, I've been promoted. I now lead my own team of forensic accountants. We're currently investigating several potentially fraudulent investment schemes. I hadn't planned to mention my work so specifically, but something in me needed them to know I was successful by any reasonable standard. A flash of something, concern, irritation, crossed my father's face before his expression settled back into casual dismissal. Playing detective with spreadsheets. How exciting! Olivia jumped in, clearly uncomfortable with any attention directed at me. Carter and I have decided on a June wedding at the Winthrop estate. Mother, we need to start interviewing floral designers immediately. The conversation obediently shifted to wedding plans, and I retreated into silence, pushing food around my plate. I should have been used to this by now. The systematic minimization of my existence, the casual cruelty masked as family banter. But something about this particular gathering felt different. Perhaps it was the discovery of the financial discrepancies in my father's business, or perhaps it was simply that at 32 I was finally reaching my breaking point with the family dynamic. As dessert was served, my mother's famous pumpkin cheesecake that she knew I was allergic to with no alternative offered for me, Olivia began describing her upcoming bridal shower. We're thinking everyone wears white except me, of course, and Lorelai can wear whatever she finds, my mother interrupted with a laugh. White isn't her color anyway. Washes her out completely. Something snapped inside me. Actually, I'd appreciate if you'd stop making these little comments about my appearance. They're unnecessary and hurtful. The table fell silent. Confrontation was not part of the Mitchell family script. My mother's laugh was brittle. Oh, don't be so sensitive. We're just trying to help you. Someone needs to tell you these things. I don't need that kind of help, I said quietly. What I'd like is basic respect. My father set down his wineglass with deliberate care. Respect is earned, Lorelai. When you achieve something worthy of the Mitchell name, you'll get respect. I have achieved plenty, I countered, my voice steadier than I felt. Just because it doesn't fit your narrow definition of success. Oh, please, Jason interrupted, rolling his eyes. Here comes the middle child martyr routine. Some things never change. What's that supposed to mean? I asked, though part of me didn't want to hear the answer. My father leaned forward, his eyes cold. It means you've always been like this, oversensitive, underachieving, and exhausting to manage. Why do you think we limited your trust fund access? You lack the judgment to handle real responsibility. The room seemed to tilt slightly. My trust fund? What are you talking about? I received my full inheritance when I turned 30, just like Jason and Olivia. A look passed between my parents and my mother's smile turned pitying. Darling, surely you didn't think you received the same as your siblings. Your grandfather added special provisions for you. He had concerns about your stability. That's not true, I whispered, though the pieces were falling into place. How Jason and Olivia had suddenly upgraded their lifestyles at 30 while I'd received what I now realized was a fraction of my birthright. Honestly, Lorelai, my father said with exasperation, no one in this family actually likes you when you're like this. The constant victimhood is tiresome. If you just accept your place and stop trying to compete with your siblings, family gatherings would be much more pleasant. The silence that followed was absolute. Even Olivia looked uncomfortable while Jason studied his dessert with sudden fascination. Richard, my mother finally murmured that was perhaps a bit direct. But my father wasn't finished. It's time someone said it. We've been walking on eggshells around her sensitivity for years. The truth is, Lorelai has always been difficult. From the day she was born. Never fit properly in this family. Some people just aren't cut from the same cloth, and pretending otherwise does no one any favors. I stood up so abruptly my chair nearly toppled backward. "Thank you for dinner," I said, my voice eerily calm considering I felt like I was shattering inside. "I think it's best if I leave now." "Don't be dramatic," my mother sighed. "Sit down and have your dessert." "I'm allergic to pumpkin," I reminded her. As I have been my entire life, I walked out of the dining room to the sound of my father saying, "See, always making everything about herself." 20 minutes later, I sat in my car in a grocery store parking lot, tears streaming down my face as I finally allowed the magnitude of what had happened to hit me. No one in this family actually likes you. My father's words echoed in my mind, confirming what I had suspected but never wanted to believe. As I struggled to catch my breath between sobs, my phone lit up with a text from Marcus. "Hope dinner's going okay. Here if you need me." In that moment I made a decision. The Mitchell family had shown me exactly where I stood. Now it was time to show them exactly who I was. The week after Thanksgiving passed in a blur of emotional numbness. I called in sick to work, something I'd never done before, and spent days alternating between crying jags and periods of eerie calm. Marcus came over with soup and quiet companionship, asking no questions when I said I wasn't ready to talk about what had happened. My phone buzzed occasionally with texts from Olivia. Performative concern that I knew was prompted by our mother, which I left unanswered. By the following Monday, something had shifted inside me. The hurt was still there, a tender bruise on my psyche, but it was now accompanied by a cold clarity I had never experienced before. The Mitchell family had made their position clear. They had never valued me as a daughter or sister. They had manipulated my inheritance, lied to my face for years, and then cruelly confirmed what I had always sensed but tried to deny, that I was considered fundamentally unworthy of their love or respect. I returned to work with a new sense of purpose. The financial discrepancies I had noticed in my father's investment firm no longer represented a moral dilemma. They were now a thread I could pull to unravel the carefully constructed facade of Mitchell family respectability. My position as a forensic accountant gave me access to financial databases and analytical tools that the average person wouldn't know how to navigate. I began by pulling public records on Mitchell Financial Partners, creating a timeline of the firm's growth and identifying patterns in their reported returns. Next, I reached out to former colleagues who had moved to the Securities and Exchange Commission, framing my questions as professional curiosity about certain investment structures. "These returns seem remarkably consistent," I mentioned casually to Sarah, a former cubicle mate now working for the SEC. "Is that normal in this market?" Sarah's pause told me everything I needed to know. Not really. Especially not over that time period. The market was volatile then. Everyone saw fluctuations. Consistent returns like that would be unusual. Theoretically speaking, I continued, if someone wanted to look deeper into this kind of pattern, where would they start? The conversation yielded valuable information about what documentation would be most revealing and which regulatory bodies would take interest in different types of financial irregularities. I took meticulous notes, developing a methodical plan that would leave nothing to chance. Over the next 2 months, I built my case with painstaking precision. I created a secure virtual storage space where I organized evidence, public financial records, investor statements from willing participants like my elderly neighbor, analysis of return patterns that defied market logic, and a growing list of inconsistencies that pointed to something much bigger than creative accounting. What emerged was the outline of a sophisticated Ponzi scheme. My father's firm had been delivering impossibly steady returns by using new investor money to pay existing clients, all while skimming millions for the firm. The operation was cleverly disguised with complex financial instruments and legitimate-looking paperwork, but the numbers didn't lie. Mitchell Financial Partners was a house of cards waiting to collapse. The revelation should have shocked me, but somehow it didn't. The father who could look his daughter in the eye and tell her no one in the family liked her was capable of looking investors in the eye while stealing their life savings. The moral bankruptcy was consistent. As I compiled my evidence, I was careful to maintain absolute secrecy. I worked only on my personal laptop using secure connections and encrypted storage. I told no one, not even Marcus, what I was doing. This wasn't just about protecting my investigation, it was about protecting myself. The Richard Mitchell I now understood would stop at nothing to silence a threat to his empire, even if that threat was his own daughter. One evening in late January, as I was cross-referencing investment statements, my phone rang with Olivia's number. "Lorelai, finally, I've been trying to reach you for weeks." Her voice carried the familiar note of exasperation that my family typically used when addressing me. "I've been busy," I replied neutrally. "Well, you need to call Mom. She's upset that you missed the Christmas party and New Year's. Dad says you're being childish about Thanksgiving." I almost laughed at the absurdity. Childish. "He told me no one in the family likes me, Olivia." "He didn't mean it like that," she said dismissively. "You know how Dad gets when he's had a few drinks." "You're so sensitive about everything." "Did you know about my trust fund?" I asked abruptly. "Did you know I received less than you and Jason?" Her hesitation was answer enough. "Look, Lorelai, Grandpa had his reasons. And honestly, what would you have done with that money anyway? It's not like you have the financial acumen that Jason and I do." Something cold settled in my stomach. "You knew. All this time you knew they were treating me differently." "Don't make this into some big conspiracy," Olivia said, her tone hardening. "The fact that you're turning this into a dramatic production is exactly why they made the decisions they did. You've always been difficult. The rest of us learned to work within the family structure, but you were always pushing against it." "The family structure," I repeated slowly. "You mean the one where I'm treated as less than, where my feelings don't matter, where I'm the perpetual outsider?"
Oh my God, there you go again. This is exactly what I'm talking about.
"Everything is always about poor Lorelai and how unfairly she's treated." Olivia's voice had taken on the same cutting tone our mother used. "Grow up, Lore. Life isn't fair. The sooner you accept your place and stop making everything so difficult, the happier everyone will be." "My place," I echoed. "And what exactly is my place in this family, Olivia?" She sighed heavily. "I don't know, Lorelai. That's for you to figure out. But this sulking and disappearing act isn't helping anything. Just call Mom, apologize for overreacting at Thanksgiving, and let's all move on. Carter's parents are throwing us an engagement dinner next weekend and Mother expects you to be there." After we hung up, I sat motionless in my darkened apartment, Olivia's words echoing in my head alongside my father's Thanksgiving pronouncement.
"Accept your place. No one in this family actually likes you."
The message was consistent. I was tolerated, not loved. Expected to play my assigned role while receiving none of the benefits or support that my siblings enjoyed. That night, I made a final decision. I had been collecting evidence with the vague idea of exposing my father's fraudulent business practices, but now I developed a more comprehensive plan. The Mitchells had systematically devalued me my entire life. They had denied me my rightful inheritance. They had made it abundantly clear that I would never be accepted as a full member of the family. so be it. If they wanted to see me as an outsider, I would show them exactly what this outsider was capable of. I opened my laptop and began drafting an anonymous tip to the SEC, carefully structuring it to protect my identity while providing enough concrete evidence to trigger a formal investigation. But I didn't send it. Not yet. First, I needed to ensure that when the Mitchell Empire fell, I would be positioned to emerge from the rubble not just unscathed but victorious. By February, my plan had evolved from simple exposure of my father's financial crimes to something far more comprehensive. The Mitchell family had spent decades building their social and financial fortress, positioning themselves as pillars of Boston society while treating me as an embarrassing afterthought. Dismantling that fortress would require precision, patience, and perfect timing. I began by discreetly liquidating my modest investments and building a cash reserve. Next, I researched the structure of my family's various holdings and trusts, identifying vulnerabilities in their financial architecture. What I discovered confirmed my suspicions. My grandfather's original trust had indeed been modified to restrict my access, but there were other family assets that had been hidden from me entirely. The key to my strategy emerged when I discovered that my grandmother's original will had established a separate trust that would revert to equal distribution among all grandchildren if certain conditions were met. One such condition was gross financial misconduct by the trustees, currently my parents. This clause had been buried in legal language and apparently forgotten by everyone except perhaps my father's attorneys. It represented a potential reset button for the Mitchell family fortune. Working methodically, I built a two-pronged approach. First, gather irrefutable evidence of my father's Ponzi scheme for the regulatory authorities. Second, position myself to trigger the redistribution clause in my grandmother's trust when the scandal broke. The plan required absolute secrecy and perfect timing. I created a secure email account under a pseudonym and began corresponding with a senior investigator at the Securities and Exchange Commission, feeding carefully selected pieces of evidence that would guide their investigation without revealing my identity. Meanwhile, I consulted with a trust attorney, not one of my father's associates but an expert from New York with no connections to Boston society, about the potential ramifications of the trust violation clauses. Hypothetically speaking, I asked during our confidential consultation if the trustee of a family trust were convicted of financial fraud, would that trigger clauses related to gross misconduct? The attorney's eyes narrowed, thoughtfully. Almost certainly, especially if the fraud involved mismanagement of trust assets. But these situations can be complex. Timing matters, as does the specific language of the trust documents. I nodded mentally, adding more items to my checklist. And in such cases, who typically has standing to petition for redistribution under original terms? Any named beneficiary? He confirmed exactly the answer I had hoped for. By March, I had compiled a comprehensive dossier on Mitchell Financial Partners' fraudulent activities, complete with documentation of wire transfers, falsified returns, and a list of high-profile victims whose outrage would ensure media attention. I had also quietly located and contacted my grandmother's original estate attorney, now retired in Florida, who provided critical insights about the trust's redistribution mechanisms. Throughout this process, I maintained a carefully crafted facade. I resumed limited contact with my family, responding to texts and occasionally joining family events where I played the role they expected. The chastened middle child who had overreacted at Thanksgiving and was now trying to fit back into the family fold. Each interaction was a performance designed to lull them into complacency, while I positioned the final pieces of my plan. "You seem different," Marcus observed one evening as we shared takeout in my apartment. "More determined about something." I smiled noncommittally. "Just focusing on work. Big case. Is it helping?" With processing what happened with your family, I considered his question carefully. Marcus was the one person who had consistently valued me, who saw my worth without qualification. but even he couldn't be trusted with the full scope of what I was planning. Not yet. I'm finding my way through it, I answered truthfully, if incompletely. Sometimes clarity comes from unexpected places. April arrived with cherry blossoms and a series of family events centered around Olivia's upcoming wedding. I attended her bridal shower, smiling through my mother's backhanded compliments and my sister's self-centered monologues. Each gathering was an exercise in restraint as I watched them bask in their perceived superiority, unaware that I was methodically dismantling the foundation of their privileged existence. The final catalyst came during a family dinner celebrating my father's birthday. As champagne flowed and toasts were made to his business acumen and leadership, I sat quietly observing the tableau of Mitchell family mythology in action. To the man who built an empire from determination and vision, Jason proclaimed, raising his glass. Dad, you've shown us all what it means to be a Mitchell. Here's to many more years of success and prosperity, my mother added, her diamond bracelet catching the light as she clinked glasses with my father. I raised my glass along with everyone else, my smile fixed in place as I thought about the SEC investigator who had emailed that morning, confirming they had opened a formal investigation into Mitchell Financial Partners. The timing was exquisite. Within weeks, this celebration would seem like the final act of a Greek tragedy, the moment of hubris before the fall. As dessert was served, my father turned his attention to me for the first time that evening. Lorelei seems unusually quiet tonight. No complaints about being underappreciated. His tone was jovial, but the barb was unmistakable. Not at all, I replied evenly. I've been doing a lot of thinking about family lately. About legacies and what we leave behind. Well, that's refreshingly mature, my mother interjected with surprise. Perhaps you're finally outgrowing that middle child syndrome. I smiled, meeting my father's eyes directly. I've simply gained perspective on what really matters. Something in my tone must have registered because my father's expression shifted subtly, a flicker of unease crossing his features before he masked it with another sip of scotch. For a brief moment I wondered if on some instinctive level he sensed the threat I now posed. That night as I drove home, I finalized my timeline. The SEC investigation would become public knowledge soon, triggering financial chaos for the firm. When that happened, I would be ready to file the petition to activate the redistribution clause in my grandmother's trust, positioning myself to gain control of assets that had been intentionally kept from me. Hey everyone, I know we're at a crucial point in the story where everything is about to change for Lorelei and the Mitchell family. If you're feeling that tension building, hit that like button to let me know you're invested in what happens next. Are you Team Lorelei, or do you think family loyalty should come first no matter what? Let me know in the comments. If you're enjoying this family vengeance story, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the explosive conclusion. Now let's see what happens when Lorelei's carefully laid plans finally come to fruition. The next morning I received an encrypted email from my SEC contact investigation proceeding to formal stage. Public disclosure imminent. Suggest your anonymous source maintain distance. I closed my laptop and took a deep breath. After years of dismissal and months of meticulous planning, the mechanism of justice was finally in motion. The Mitchell family empire was about to crumble, and from its ruins I would build something new, a life where I was not defined by their perception of me but by my own strength and determination. As I prepared for work that day, I felt a strange sense of calm. The hurt child who had sobbed in a grocery store parking lot after Thanksgiving dinner was gone. In her place stood a woman who understood her worth and who would no longer accept being treated as less than. The family that had never found room in their hearts to truly accept me was about to discover exactly what they had created with their years of casual cruelty. No one in this family actually likes you, my father had said. Soon he would learn the cost of those words. The SEC investigation became public on a rainy Tuesday in May, exactly 1 month before Olivia's lavish wedding was scheduled to take place. The Boston Globe's business section ran the headline "Mitchell Financial Partners Under Federal Investigation for Suspected Fraud." By noon, all major financial news outlets had picked up the story, and my father's carefully cultivated reputation began its rapid descent into infamy. I watched the fallout from the deliberate distance I had established, maintaining my normal work routine while monitoring developments through news alerts and the encrypted communications from my SEC contact. The investigation moved with surprising speed, fueled by the comprehensive evidence I had provided and the high profile of many victims. Within days, federal agents had seized records from my father's offices, and investors were publicly questioning the suspiciously consistent returns they had received over the years. The first family call came from Jason, his voice tense with controlled panic. "Have you seen the news about Dad's firm?" "It's all over the financial sites," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "It looks serious." "It's a witch hunt," he said dismissively, though I could hear the uncertainty beneath his bravado. "Some disgruntled employee or jealous competitor feeding lies to the feds. Dad's attorneys will sort it out." "I hope so," I said mildly. "How's Mom taking it?" Jason's bitter laugh told me everything. "How do you think planning damage control for their social standing, while Dad barricades himself in his study with the lawyers? Olivia's hysterical about what this means for the wedding. The Prescotts are already making noise about postponement." I murmured, appropriate sympathies playing my role perfectly. The somewhat distant daughter, concerned but not overly involved in the family crisis. After hanging up, I opened my secure email and sent a pre-drafted message to my attorney in New York, instructing him to prepare the petition regarding my grandmother's trust. Timing would be crucial. We needed the evidence of financial misconduct to be substantial enough to trigger the clause, but had to file before my parents could attempt to move or hide assets. The family fortress crumbled with stunning rapidity. Within 2 weeks, preliminary findings from the SEC investigation revealed that Mitchell Financial Partners had misappropriated over $50 million from investors through an elaborate Ponzi scheme. My father was facing potential criminal charges, and the firm's assets were frozen. The social fallout was equally devastating. Invitations were rescinded, board positions vacated, and the Mitchell name became toxic in the Boston society circles where my parents had reigned for decades. Olivia's wedding was postponed indefinitely when Carter's parents insisted on a prenuptial agreement that would shield their son from any financial or legal complications arising from his association with the Mitchell family. The golden daughter, who had never faced rejection, was suddenly experiencing what it felt like to be judged and found wanting based on her family connection. As the scandal expanded, I maintained my careful distance, declining invitations to family emergency meetings and citing work commitments when my mother demanded my presence at their home. Instead, I worked with my attorney to time our legal maneuver perfectly. When federal prosecutors formally charged my father with multiple counts of securities fraud, wire fraud, and money laundering, we filed our petition regarding my grandmother's trust the very same day. The legal document was a masterpiece of strategic timing. It cited the specific trust language regarding gross financial misconduct, presented evidence that trust assets had been commingled with fraudulent business operations, and petitioned for immediate redistribution according to my grandmother's original intent: equal shares to all grandchildren, bypassing my parents entirely. The petition blindsided my family, who had been focused entirely on the criminal charges and had not anticipated an attack from within. My mother called me immediately, her voice shrill with anger and disbelief. "What the hell do you think you're doing? Your father is fighting for his life, for this family's future, and you're filing legal motions against us. Have you completely lost your mind?" "I'm simply ensuring that grandmother's wishes are respected," I replied calmly. "The trust terms are very clear about misconduct. This is a betrayal of everything this family stands for," she hissed. "I always knew you were different, difficult, but I never thought you capable of this level of disloyalty." "Disloyalty," I repeated, finally allowing some emotion into my voice. Was it loyal when you and Dad manipulated my inheritance? When you lied to my face for years about what I was entitled to? When Dad announced at Thanksgiving dinner that no one in the family actually likes me? Her momentary silence confirmed what I had always suspected. They had never expected me to fight back. They had underestimated me my entire life, and that blindness was now their undoing. "You need to withdraw this petition immediately," she finally said, her voice cold with fury. "If you don't, you will no longer be considered part of this family." I almost laughed at the hollow threat. "Mom, you made it clear at Thanksgiving that I was never truly part of this family to begin with." "I'm simply ensuring that grandmother's wishes are honored. The trust was meant to be divided equally." "You'll regret this," she said, her voice trembling with rage. "When this is all over, don't expect to ever be welcomed back." As I hung up the phone, I felt an unexpected wave of relief. The threat that would have once devastated me now held no power. I was finally free of the desperate need for their approval that had shaped so much of my life. The legal battle over my grandmother's trust moved quickly, aided by the mounting evidence of my father's financial crimes. The court appointed an independent trustee to evaluate the petition, and their findings supported my claim. By early June, the judge ruled in my favor, granting the redistribution of the trust according to the original terms, equal shares to all grandchildren with my parents removed as trustees. The financial implications were staggering. The trust contained not just liquid assets but significant real estate holdings, including the Wellesley family home and a vacation property on Nantucket. My parents, already reeling from the collapse of the firm and mounting legal fees, now faced the prospect of losing their homes and the bulk of their personal wealth. Jason called me the day after the court ruling, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. "Are you happy now? You've destroyed this family." "The family was destroyed long before I filed that petition," I replied evenly. "Dad did that when he decided to commit fraud. You all contributed when you decided I was worth less than the rest of you. So this is revenge for some perceived slight, for being told the truth about your place in this family. This isn't revenge, Jason. It's justice. I'm simply ensuring that I receive what was always rightfully mine, an equal share, no more, no less. The same standard you and Olivia have benefited from your entire lives." His bitter laugh echoed through the phone. "You have no idea what you've done. Dad's attorneys are talking plea deal. He might go to prison. Mom's a wreck. Olivia's fiancé has called things off entirely, and now you've taken their homes. Hope your little victory is worth it." After hanging up, I sat in silence, processing his words. There was a time when his accusation would have crushed me with guilt, but that time had passed. The Mitchell family had made their choices. Years of systematic exclusion, culminating in that fatal Thanksgiving dinner when they had finally said aloud what I had always felt, that I didn't belong, wasn't valued, wasn't liked. They had defined me as an outsider. And now they were facing the consequences of underestimating exactly what this outsider was capable of. The summer brought a complete reversal of the Mitchell family dynamic. My father, once the powerful patriarch ruling from the head of the table, accepted a plea deal that included significant financial restitution, forfeiture of assets, and a 5-year prison sentence. My mother, stripped of her social standing and luxury lifestyle, retreated to a small condo owned by a distant relative, her circle of friends suddenly unavailable for lunch dates and charity committees. Jason's law firm, concerned about association with the scandal, placed him on indefinite leave, causing financial strain that was exacerbated by his expensive mortgage and Vanessa's shopping habits. Olivia, devastated by her cancelled wedding and subsequent social ostracism, developed anxiety so severe she could barely leave her apartment. And me, I found myself in possession of financial resources I had never expected, my equal third of my grandmother's substantial trust, professionally managed and growing steadily. I purchased a beautiful brownstone in Cambridge and established a foundation to assist victims of financial fraud, particularly the elderly who had been targeted by schemes like my father's. I had kept Marcus at arm's length during the worst of the family implosion, unwilling to burden our relationship with the intensity of what was happening. But as the dust began to settle, I finally shared the full story with him over dinner in my new home. I suspected something was happening, he admitted, refilling our wine glasses. You had this focused energy, like someone with a mission. Are you disappointed in me? I asked quietly. For what I did to my family, Marcus considered the question thoughtfully, one of the qualities I had always valued in him. I don't think you did anything to them that they hadn't already done to themselves, he finally said. Your father committed actual crimes. You just made sure you weren't collateral damage in his downfall. As for the rest, they made it clear where you stood with them. You were just smart enough to listen and act accordingly. His perspective was validating in a way I hadn't realized I needed. For months I had operated with cold determination, focused entirely on executing my plan. Now that it had succeeded beyond my expectations, I sometimes questioned whether the comprehensive nature of their downfall was justified by what they had done to me. I keep thinking about something my grandfather used to say before he died, I told Marcus. He told me once that I had a quiet strength the others lacked. At the time I thought he was just being kind to the family misfit. Now I wonder if he saw something in me that my parents missed, or feared. He sounds like a wise man, Marcus smiled. I'd say he was absolutely right. As summer turned to fall, my siblings found themselves in increasingly dire financial circumstances. With my father in prison, and my mother living on a fraction of her former income, they had no safety net to fall back on. Their own trust funds, heavily invested in our father's now defunct firm, had evaporated with the scandal. It was Olivia who reached out first, her text message tentative and uncharacteristically humble. Can we talk, please? We met at a quiet cafe near Harvard Square, far from our family's usual haunts. She looked thinner than I remembered, her designer clothes replaced by simple jeans and a sweater, her normally perfect makeup minimal. You look well, she said after an awkward greeting. The new place suits you. Thank you, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. How have you been? She gave a brittle laugh. Terrible. Completely, utterly terrible. Carter's family made it clear I'm persona non grata. Most of my friends have disappeared. I had to move out of my apartment because I couldn't afford the rent. I'm staying with a former colleague from the museum and working as an assistant in an art gallery for barely above minimum wage. I nodded, letting her continue without comment. Jason's not doing much better, she added. Vanessa left him last month, took half of what little they had left. He's drinking too much, missing job interviews. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and meant it. Despite everything, they were still my siblings, and there was no satisfaction in hearing about their suffering. Olivia studied me for a long moment. You're different, she finally said. Stronger. More. I don't know. Certain of yourself? Perspective changes people, I replied. So does standing up for yourself. Is that what this was? Standing up for yourself? There was no accusation in her tone, just genuine curiosity. Partly, I acknowledged. It was also about justice, about correcting a fundamental imbalance that had shaped our entire family dynamic. She nodded slowly. I've had a lot of time to think lately. About how we treated you, how I treated you. It wasn't right. She looked down at her coffee cup, her voice dropping. I was so caught up in being the favorite and maintaining my position in Mom and Dad's eyes that I never questioned what that meant for you. It was the closest thing to an apology I had ever received from any member of my family. Not a full acknowledgement of the years of casual cruelty, but a beginning. What do you want, Olivia? I asked directly. Why did you want to meet? She took a deep breath. 2 things. First, to say, I'm sorry. Truly sorry for my part in how you were treated. I can't speak for Mom and Dad, but I can speak for myself. It was wrong and I was wrong. I nodded, accepting her words without immediate forgiveness. And the second thing I need help, she admitted, her voice barely audible. Not just money though, God knows I need that too. I need guidance. Direction. You've always been so self-sufficient, so capable of building your own path. I don't know how to exist without the family structure, without the Mitchell name opening doors. I don't know who I am without all that. The irony wasn't lost on me. My sister, who had always been the golden child, now coming to me, the family outcast, for help finding her identity. I'm not saying we can just go back to being close sisters, she continued when I didn't immediately respond. I know too much has happened. But maybe we could try to build something new. Something healthier. As I considered her request, I realized that true power wasn't in revenge or even in justice. It was in having the choice, to help or not, to forgive or not, to rebuild or walk away. For the first time in my life, I was the one with the power to define the terms of my family relationships. I can help you get on your feet, I finally said. With conditions. Complete honesty, respect for boundaries, and acknowledgement of the past without minimizing it. I'm willing to try building something new, but I won't pretend the old pattern was acceptable. Relief washed over her face. Thank you, she whispered. I'll try. I really will. As fall progressed, I established clear but supportive relationships with both Olivia and eventually Jason. I provided financial assistance with strict conditions, therapy for both, career counseling, and regular check-ins that maintained appropriate boundaries. They were no longer the privileged golden children, and I was no longer the family scapegoat. We were three adults with a complicated shared history, tentatively exploring whether a new dynamic was possible. My mother remained distant, unable or unwilling to acknowledge her. She sent a Christmas card with a family note a small but telling letter from prison, a strange mixture of accusation and reluctant respect. You have proven yourself a Mitchell after all, he concluded. Perhaps the most formidable of us all. I didn't respond. Some bridges once burned should remain ashes. 3 years after that fateful Thanksgiving dinner, I sit in the sunlit living room of my Cambridge brownstone, reviewing the quarterly reports from my foundation. Marcus, now my husband, works quietly across from me, occasionally glancing up with a smile. My family has been irreversibly transformed. My father will be released from prison next year, a changed man by all accounts. My mother lives modestly in Rhode Island, our relationship civil but distant. Olivia and Jason have built new lives with my cautious support, our interactions governed by mutual respect rather than outdated family hierarchies. No one in this family actually likes you, my father once said. He was wrong. The person who needed to like me, to value me, to stand up for me, was myself. And in finding that strength, I found something more valuable than family approval. I found justice, peace, and finally the power to define my own place in the world. So what about you? Have you ever experienced a family betrayal that forced you to completely reimagine your relationships? Or have you witnessed karma come full circle in your own life? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this tale of family vengeance and personal transformation resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about finding justice and rebuilding after betrayal. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember, sometimes the family you choose is more important than the family you're born into.